Welcome to the fastest daf in town. Today we're going to start the Succah daf Chaf Hey. We are going to begin on Chaf Hey Amud Aleph by the Mishnah. Shluchim mitzvah paturim min Succah. As we heard this line once before in this Masechta, if a person is engaged in a mitzvah, they do not have an obligation to sit in a sukkah. And Rashi explains, Hoichi b'derech mitzvah. If you're traveling, you can go in L'matayra, Kabel Pnei Rabbi, Liftei Shavuyim. So you have different mitzvahs that Rashi cites that while you're going to do a mitzvah, you're traveling, so you don't have to stop and figure out a sukkah, even in a time, as Rashi says, b'shas chinas, even in a time that you're resting. And then the Mishnah tells us that not only someone who is sick, but also their servants, they do not have to be in a sukkah. And then finally, a person is allowed to eat and drink arai, temporary things such as peros, as we learned in the end of Masechta Yomi, outside of a sukkah. So now the Gemara asks, how do we know that there's this concept that if you're osik in a mitzvah, that you're pater from sukkah? The pasuk says in the Shema, that when are you obligated to say the Shema? You're obligated to do these mitzvahs when you're just sitting around in your house. When you're just traveling and enjoying yourself, that also is prat l'chasen. That's coming to exclude a chasen who is tarid involved in the chasna, the marriage. So mekan amru, from here we derived that a kindness is a besul pater, v'esal manachayim. At least we can understand the first part, that because you are about to marry a basul, a virgin, so you're pater because you're always in a mitzvah. When it comes to an almana, you're chayav, and you'll have to understand why. We're doing Rashi. What does it mean prat l'chas? And avagav duhunami mitzvah tarid. Question is, shouldn't that already be under the category of b'shiv decha b'veisecha, prat l'oisek b'mitzvah? So why do we have a second pasuk to exclude a chasen? So struchil hu trei kroi. Di havik simcha. If we only had one, kivad the chasen lad behendik sib b'kra. It's not explicitly in the pasuk. Havamina will pater chasen el tarich ba'oisem el lechas mitzvah b'yadayim. Maybe we think it's only when you're actually doing an action. Oh, mahalach a mitzvah, you're actually traveling, you're physically engaged in some activity. Of a chasen shu yoshev b'batel, he's just sitting around. He is being engaged in thinking about the machshava of having tashmish. Will pater kaset hilkach mikroyis seirash me'inan the pater mikrishma the tarid the machshavas be'ilah. That even if you're not actually oisik in a mitzvah, or you're going to do a mitzvah b'yadayim, even b'machshava, that would be enough. Okay. So now the Gemara is not satisfied with this pshat. And he says, my mashma. How do we derive from this pasuk it's exclude a mitzvah? So Rav Huna kederech. Ma derech rishos, I've called derech, I've called rishos. So just like the road, you're free to go on the road, you're free to travel the country, so it's rishos. You're not doing anything in particular, not a mitzvah. Lafuki, hi, the mitzvah also. It must be coming to exclude the miyad of the pasuk is only when you're just engaged in your own trivial matters or your business. That's when you have to do this mitzvah. However, if you're already oising in the mitzvah, it's not necessary. So milaskina the kazul of our mitzvah. Maybe the pasuk is actually telling you that you're actually traveling. The pasuk still saying, even so you have to read. So in kain limikra b'sheves of alechas, my b'shiv decha v'lechtecha, you're going, you're sitting. It's v'lechas dedachu the mechayeves. Habalechas the mitzvah patiris. It's only because it's v'lechtecha. You're doing it for yourself. You're not doing a mitzvah, which is mashma. If you're doing a mitzvah, you possible. So the Gemara says, okay, hachi afil kindness is amananami. Marrying a widow who's been previously married, that's also a mitzvah. So then why do we make an exception and say you're still chayav? So Gemara says, kindness is a basula tarid, kindness almana lo tarid. When it comes to a basula, you're tarid, because as Rashi says, the machshavs be'ilah. You're thinking about the bila, about the real tashmish. However, when it comes to an almana, you're not tarid, and therefore, you, as Rashi says, Yochel Kaimishtayan, you can still do the mitzvah of marrying her, but since you're not tarid, so therefore you should also be able to say the Shema. So you're saying it's all totally on your anxiety and how much you're worried about. So let's say a person's ship, which has all of his merchandise, millions of dollars of stuff, and it's sinking in the sea, he certainly is tarid, but that's not a mitzvah. So the question is, of course you'd still be chayiv. So why would we say that the distinction between an almana and a basula is you're not tarid by the almana? So what? You're still, one's a mitzvah, one's not a mitzvah. Sinking boats are not mitzvahs. So if it's totally untarid, then you should be chayiv there. You should be pater rather. And maybe say, yeah, in Echanami you're pater when it comes to your tarid. Avil, someone who is in a state of mourning, which there is no greater level of being tarid, of grief, that person is currently undergoing, nonetheless, that individual is obligated to do kol terkula, with one exception. It's not the word tefillin, because by Cheskel it says the word pa'er, it has to be something with glory, glorified, and he's not someone who is in the category of pa'er. So therefore the question is, we clearly see that when it comes to halacha, being tarid is not the determining factor of whether a person should be pater or chayav. Where it is hacha tarid tir de mitzvah, hasam tarid tir de rishos, and this is almost verbatim in Masechtas Brachos. So if you're tarid in a matter of rishos, so like the boat sinking, so it's not something that really matters as far as a mitzvah is concerned, so you're still chayav. So too, when it comes to avelus, this is a very important Rashi. Shafa bishu chayiv linhoig avelus shel ni'ila rechitza sichal haris kavan meisai enu chayiv l'sta'er. You have to go through the motions, but your anxiety and being upset, that's not something in which is part of the mitzvah. Mashen can, apparently, when it comes to a chasan, with a basula, that element of being tarid is something that does apply. And therefore, that's why by an almana, even though it's a mitzvah, you're not tarid. When it comes to the basula, you're tarid and it's a mitzvah. So you're telling me that's how we learn it out from this pasuk in the Shema? We're not from a different pasuk. The pasuk says in Balos for the Sanya, the pasuk says regarding a person, this group of people, they presented themselves to Moshe and said, "We are tamei mace, or tamei nefesh. We're not able to participate in the bringing of the Karban Pesach. Is there anything we could do about it?" Of course, this is where the Pesach Sheni comes about. So the Gemara says, "Osam anashim yihoyu." Who were these people that were tamei mace? So the Gemara cites some machlokas. Noisi aronu shel Yosef hayu div Rav Yosef Galili. We know that Yosef at Tzaddik, Moshe got his remains, and he brought those remains with him throughout the Midbar, because that was, as the pasuk says, ki hashmei hishmiya. It was a requirement. He swore that he would that this would be done. As we continue to ayin chav hey and beis, so therefore they were tamei mace by carrying him. Rabbi Kiva Omer Mishol vel Tzafan hayu. It was actually Mishol not Tzafan that approached. They're engaged in the remains of Nadav and Avihu. Fine. So of course that's how they became tamei. Rabbi Yitzchak Omer Im Noisirana Shel Yosef hayu. 1 second. If we're dealing with Aaron's casket, his remains, Kvar hayu l'tayr, they could have purified themselves. Also, they could have purified themselves. So it shouldn't be that. So we'll see what the answer is in a second. Let's look at this crucial Rashi. So the question is, why would they tell me mace on Erev Pesach? or they're completing their tumah. So Rashi says like this: Shari be'echa b'Nisan hukum Mishkan. We know on the first day of Nisan is when the Mishkan was established. It was Sheni Boi was the next day. Sarv Elazar as para. Elazar brought the paraduma. Sheyizu al tamei mace, that he sprinkled on anyone who's tamei mace. Shebehen lasas pischein b'tahara. So this way they'll be able to bring the korban pesach. Kedem Masechtas Gittin. Shmoyne parashas nemer b'yoim shulkam mishkan. Uparaduma achs mehen. The paraduma was one of them. V'vech b'nisan hukam mishkan v'hu ches l'miluyim. We know that's the Yom Hashmini. It was the 8th day of the inauguration. Kedem Kaimah is brought down Masechtas Shabbos. The oisa hayoim natal eser atarois uvo meso nadav aviyu. It was on that day, on the 1st of Nisan, that nadav aviyu died. So if they were dressing the remains of nadav aviyu, they shouldn't be tamei 2 weeks later. Hilkach morosh chaydish al pesach shal yichon l'taher. They could have become pure. Says Rashi, Vikara Oimar Kama Omar lo yochel. They weren't able to. There's already 10 days, 10 months. Shlo nasu mishachanu bahar chayri b'rosh chodesh Sivan. They were already Rosh Chodesh Sivan 10 months earlier encamped, as the pasuk says in Shemos. V'yom hazeh bo mimar Sinai v'lo nasu misham ad esrem be'ir shel shana ba. They didn't actually leave until the following year, on the 20th of year. B'shana hashenis, b'chodesh hasheni, which is Iyar, b'esem l'chodesh na'lehanan miyal v'yisu mahar. So there's no reason to say, certainly to say that it was the Aron when they put it down, and they were already there in the month of Sivan, so they were tar for 10 months ago. That can't be. And even the Avihu, they died in the beginning of Nisan. There's a 2-week gap. So that can't be the Pshat either. El oiskim a mis mitzvah. They're just stam, they're oisik in a mis mitzvah. Shechal shvishal hiliyos b'erev Pesach. Happened to be their 7th day of sitting, of being tamei, was on Erev Pesach. So technically, once Pesach starts, they're no longer tamei, because they've finished their 7th day. We can't bring the korban pesach today on Erev Pesach because we're still tamei. It's our last day. We would have been able to do it the following day. So what do we see? So we see that the fact that they became tamei, they were supposed to become tamei mace, even though they knew there was a korban pesach to be brought a week later. It didn't matter because oisik mitzvah, patam mitzvah. So the question is, why do we learn it out? This whole din from the Shema. You should be ordering out from this pasuk here. Sricha. Truth is, we need both sources. In this circumstance, maybe the reason why they became tamei mace is even though they know that means in 7 days they won't be in Pesach, but at this moment there's no other mitzvah being confronted. It's a week from now, the current Pesach. Over in this situation where you have the Shema in front of you, so maybe you have to do the Shema. Obviously, when it comes to Korban Pesach, it's a very serious offense, not bringing it, and therefore, because it's a of Karis, maybe that's where the exception is made. Question 12. Again, by Pesach, it has a din Karis, and when a Krishma, the mitzvah is in front of you as opposed to Pesach, which is a week later. Good. Getting back to what we said before. Amrav Abba Bar Zavda Amrav. All bills kabel mitzvahs so much b'Torah. A mourner is obligated to all mitzvahs chutz min tefillin, shari neman b'pa'er, as I mentioned before. V'dermalei rachman b'yecheskel. Hashem said to Yecheskel, Parchacha v'shalecha. I want you to wear your glory. This is the time in which Yecheskel was an Avel. And Hashem was saying to him, I want to make an exception for you, that you should wear tefillin. Which is mashma. Atu the mechayanis. L'kolyama patiri. Dafke him. Everyone else is pater. Yohani will be Yom Rishon. This is the only time you don't wear tefillin is on the first day of the person's death. That day was a bitter day. So he's obligated in the sukkah. So pshita, of course, we said he's chayav in all mitzvahs. If he's chayav in all mitzvahs except for tefillin, obviously that includes sukkah. He should be chayav. So we know that someone who is in anguish does not have to sit in the sukkah. If there's bugs, it's freezing cold, it's boiling hot. So hainami mitzdarhu, he's also in sar. So kamashmalon. So what's the kamashmalon? An avil is in sar. So why do we say he's chayav in the sukkah? That's the sar that came from, let's say, from the sukkah itself. He's bringing this anguish upon himself. He needs to calm himself down. And therefore the element, as we saw in Rashi, even though you have to go through certain motions of Hilchos Avelos, there's no mitzvah to be in tsar. It may be a natural phenomena, but that's not going to pot you from sitting in the sukkah. Chasen, not only is the chasen, but also also the people that accompany him, they do not have to be in the sukkah. Not only the chasen, but no one else either, because they're all always in the mitzvah. Because they need to make him happy. So why don't they eat in the sukkah and have him rejoice in the sukkah? So in simcha b'chuppah. Now he has to be by the chuppah, and that's the place where the simcha will take place. We'll let them eat in the sukkah, and then they'll stop eating, and they'll go to the chuppah a few blocks away. So where it says in simcha b'makom suda, the simcha is only the place where there's food, as every Jew knows. In simcha b'makom suda. So therefore, they have to be mesamechim by the chuppah, which means in the absence of a sukkah. And because they're oisik in that mitzvah, they don't have to do anything. So, why the chuppah b'sukkah? Why don't they actually make the chuppah like the sukkah, right? Or put them right next to each other. So Abaye Omer no, mishum yichud. That's not acceptable because of yichud. What does that mean? It says Rashi, the stam sukkah hayu oisin b'gagosein. In those days, sukkahs used to be on roofs. And people would not be coming and going so often because it's very difficult. The shemi yard chasen, the last of srachah, the chasen is going to need to, let's say, use the bathroom. And you're going to have a guy that's just going to be sitting there with the kala. So of course we know there's a question of Baal Be'ir if he's in the same city. So shaykh, of course, that the teretz would be that he had to distance himself quite far away. So what's the sar chasen? Rashi says, Shamakim sar, it's very narrow, Upasuach, it's open, Shelo Elo Shosh Nafon, there's only 3 walls, he's going to be embarrassed to basically come close to his wife. So my binayu, ikibinayu, the shchichi inshi, the nafki ba'ayel hasim. Let's say there's a bunch of people that are constantly there. You don't have to worry about yichud. Because he wants an opportunity to be able to be with his wife. I ate in the sukkah and I rejoiced in the chuppah. And I was even more happy to call avidna tarti because I did too. So instead of using these loopholes to not have to sit in the sukkah, the fact that I was able to do 2 mitzvahs, sukkah and the mitzvahs of Nesuin, this was something which was very great. So Rashi says, how is this possible though? How did you get married during sukkahs? So he says, Shenasa Erev Regel, he got married before sukkahs, but B'Taycha Regel, during sukkahs, he quotes the Gemara in Masechtas Moed Katan, they noisin nashim b'mayit. They'll have to get married on Chol Moed. So it must be that he got married before. Of course, it's interesting why Rashi brings this down here. The Mishnah already said and talked about a chassid just a few lines before. So it's only over here Rashi brings that down. Tanoma, chassid, as we said, hushvinin b'chol b'nei chuppah. Everyone who's engaged in this mitzvah, patur min tefillah, not only they're patur from sukkah, they're patur from davening, min tefillin, v'chayavin b'kriyas shema. But we still want them to say the Shema. So why are they patur from tefillah? Because you have to have kavanah. Tefillin also because while they're having simcha, they may have alcoholic beverages. And Rashi says, the shlicha shichus or kalos reish. There could be people that are intoxicated and lightheaded. However, you have to still say the Shema. Why? Says Rashi, the mitzvah kavanasa enu el pasuk rishon. All you have to do is have kavanah for one pasuk. Yichol leishav daitin shakatana k'nei likro pasuk rishon. It's not the end of the world to have kavanah for that small amount of time. So you're still chayiv in Kriya Shema. So we continue to chavav b'nal. Yishum Rabbi Shilo imru chasen pater. Only the chasen is pater, and he's pater from Kriya Shema. V'hushvinin v'chol b'nei chuppah chayavin. Everyone else is going to be chayiv, as Rashi says. V'leiselhu lahani tanoi ha'is b'mitzvah pater min a mitzvah. They don't hold this concept of ha'is b'mitzvah pater min a mitzvah, because if they're oising in a mitzvah, they shouldn't have to do Kriya Shema either. Tanya. Amr Rav Chananya ben Akavya. Kais v'sfarim. You have people that kais v'sfarim, like Sefer of Tefillin and Mezuzos, Sefer Stam, Hain, them, V'tigrehen, Tigrehen, all the different merchants that they sell second hand, third hand, the whole Oiskim B'mlacha Shemayim L'Yisui Moichi Tchelas, even someone who sells the Tchelas and tzitzis, between Kriya Shema and Tefillin and Tefillin, B'kol Mitzvah Samos B'Torah. The kind of Rabbi Yosef Glili, Shari Rabbi Yosef Glili, Omer Ha'isib B'Mitzvah Patan Mitzvah. So again, this according to this sheet is Ha'isib Mitzvah Patan Mitzvah, excluding what we said before. Okay. Question, we're going to stop there. TA 5. V'heichin Yalfinan Sha'isib B'Mitzvah Patan Mitzvah. Two answers. Okay, so we saw this either from the Shema or from the din of the Pesach Sheni. TB7. The Gemara Ma'isi Shtei Kroi Lo Hadois Mitzvah Patam Mitzvah B'Shivtecha B'Bitzecha V'Hi Ba'Anashim V'Hi Atzricha Sa the also Gemara Lo Hai Trai Kroi. So this is the exact same question that we had with question 12 is TB7. And again, when it comes to Pesach, so it's a din karetz. When it comes to the Kriya Shema, you're confronted with that mitzvah right away, so therefore you need both the psukim to tell you the same din. Ad kan.